The night was heavy with rain. Streets of the city glistened under the flickering lights of shops shutting down for the day. Sundar Pichai sat quietly in the backseat of his car, staring out of the window as the droplets slid down the glass. It had been one of those endless days filled with boardroom meetings, strategic calls, and decisions that would affect millions. Yet in that moment, none of the numbers or presentations filled his mind. Something inside him was restless, as though he was searching for a reminder of what really mattered in life. The car slowed as it reached a narrow lane known for traffic jams whenever the rains came. Sundar glanced outside, half expecting usual sight of umbrellas rushing past, people running for shelter. But instead, his eyes fell on something that made his breath catch. In the corner, barely shielded under the broken roof of a bus stop, sat a boy no older than 12. He was drenched, his clothes clinging to his thin frame, and in his trembling arms he held not one but two tiny babies wrapped in old torn cloth. Sundar leaned closer to the glass, trying to understand what he was seeing. The boy wasn't begging with loud cries like so many others on the street. Instead, he sat quietly, whispering to the babies as if telling them stories to keep them calm. His lips trembled, his voice cracked, but the way he held them, gentle and protective, told Sundar everything. These weren't just any children. They were his responsibility. The driver muttered, "Sir, should we take another route? This road may stay blocked for a while." Sundar raised his hand to signal silence. He couldn't look away. The boy, shivering in the cold rain, stretched out one hand to a passerby, not with the force of desperation, but with the dignity of someone who had no choice. The passerby shook his head, walked past, and the boy dropped his hand back down without complaint. He looked at the babies again, whispering words that Sundar could not hear inside the warm car. Sundar felt a lump rise in his throat. He had grown up in modest conditions in India, and even though life had taken him to places he had never dreamed of, he knew the sting of struggle. Yet something about this boy pierced deeper than anything he had seen in years. He told the driver to stop the car. The man hesitated. "Sir, it's raining heavily, and this area is not safe." Sundar ignored the warning, stepping out with his umbrella. The rain immediately soaked his shoes, and the chill ran up his legs, but he kept moving toward the boy. As he got closer, he could see the boy's eyes, wide and tired, yet filled with something stronger than fear. "Are you alone here?" Sundar asked softly, kneeling slightly to be at his level. The boy hesitated before nodding. "I have no one, only them." He looked down at the babies. Sundar's heart tightened. He glanced at the little one, so small, their tiny hands clutching the cloth that barely kept them warm. One coughed weakly, and Sundar felt something inside him break. "What are their names?" He asked. The boy hesitated as though afraid the truth might make everything too real. "Meera and Arjun." Sundar repeated the names under his breath. They sounded too precious to be spoken on a night like this, in the cold rain, with hunger and helplessness surrounding them. He opened his wallet instinctively, ready to offer money, but then stopped. Something told him this wasn't just about giving a few notes and walking away. This boy, with his fragile strength, carried a story far deeper than what Sundar could see at first glance. Just as Sundar was about to ask more, a loud honk came from behind. The driver shouted, "Sir, please, we need to move." The water is rising, but Sundar didn't move. He stayed frozen, staring at the boy who held on tightly to his siblings. And in that moment, he knew this wasn't a chance encounter. This was a test life had placed in front of him, and he could not walk away. Then, suddenly, the boy whispered something that made Sundar's entire body stiffen. His words were faint, almost lost in the storm, but Sundar caught them. "They will die if I don't find food tonight." The sound of thunder roared above them, but the silence that followed in Sundar's heart was louder. He knew this was only the beginning. The rain kept falling, each drop drumming like a warning against the metal roof of the bus stop. Sundar stood silently, watching the boy's trembling hands clutch the babies as if his fragile arms were the only shield between them and the merciless world. The words the boy had whispered still echoed in Sundar's mind. "They will die." if I don't find food tonight? The weight of that truth pressed down harder than the storm itself. He crouched lower, his umbrella tilting awkwardly, and asked in a voice gentler than he had used in years, "Where are your parents, Beta?" The boy's lips quivered, not from the cold alone. He swallowed hard and said, "Gone. Mama went when Mira and Arjun were born. Papa, he left a year ago. He said he would come back with work, but..." His voice broke as he looked away. He never came. Sundar's chest ached. He remembered his own parents, how they had sacrificed everything to see him study, how his mother had hidden her tears whenever she had nothing to cook, how his father had never let his dignity fall. Despite endless struggles, this boy was carrying a weight far too heavy for his small shoulders. "How old are you?" Sundar asked softly. 12. The boy's voice was barely audible, and yet it carried a strength that unsettled Sundar. 12 years old. A child. Himself, already forced into the role of a parent. Sundar could hardly imagine it. The babies whimpered softly, their cries weak, more like whispers of exhaustion than demands. The boy pulled them closer, as if afraid even the rain might steal them away. The driver stepped out, rushing to Sundar's side. "Sir, please, this is not safe. The water is rising, and your meeting tomorrow..." Sundar cut him off with a sharp glance. "I am not leaving them here." His tone was final, one that came not from the CEO of a global company, but from the boy who still lived inside him, the boy who had once known what it meant to be hungry, what it meant to have nothing. But hope. He looked at the boy again. "Come with me. I will take you somewhere safe." But the boy shook his head violently. "No. People don't let us in. They chase us away. They call me a liar. They say the babies are not mine, that I stole them to beg." His eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. "But I swear, they are my blood. My mother made me promise before she closed her eyes to never leave them." The honesty in his voice was raw, cutting through Sundar's heart like a blade. He saw no deception, no performance for sympathy, only truth, only love, only a child standing on the edge of collapse, but refusing to let go. Before Sundar could reply, another figure appeared from the darkness, a man with a rough beard staggering slightly from the weight of an alcohol bottle in his hand. He looked at the boy and sneered. "Still here, huh? Didn't I tell you this is my spot?" The boy's eyes widened with fear. He clutched the babies tighter, shrinking back against the wall of the bus stop. "Please, Baya. Just tonight. It's raining. I will move in the morning." The man laughed harshly. "Your sob stories won't work on me. People give more when I sit here. Move, or I'll make you move." Sundar felt his blood boil. He had seen men like this before, those who preyed on the weak, who turned suffering into business, who robbed even the poorest of their dignity. He stood tall, his presence commanding, though he said nothing at first. The man's eyes flicked to Sundar and then back to the boy. "Ah, so you found yourself a customer tonight. Smart. You're learning how to sell pity." He spat on the ground, his words dripping with venom. The boy's tears finally spilled, but he didn't cry out for help. Instead, he whispered to the babies, "Don't be afraid. I won't let them touch you." Sundar stepped forward, his umbrella tilting to the side as the rain poured down on his shoulders. "Leave him alone," he said firmly. The man looked him up and down, then laughed bitterly. "And who are you? Another fool who thinks he can play savior? You give him money tonight. Tomorrow he'll be back here again. This city eats people like him alive. Don't waste your breath." Sundar's voice hardened. "I said leave." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the thunder above. Then the man cursed under his breath and stumbled back into the rain, muttering something about rich men with soft hearts. The boy looked at Sundar, his lips trembling, eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Why did you help me?" Sundar crouched again, this time lowering his umbrella to cover the boy and the babies. "Because I see myself in you," he whispered. "And because no one deserves to fight this storm alone." For the first time, the boy's face softened. His shoulders, though still tense, seemed to ease just slightly, as though he allowed himself the smallest moment of relief, but before Sundar could say more, the babies began to cry louder, their tiny voices rising into the rain. Their skin was pale, their breathing uneven. Panic surged through Sundar. Something was wrong. He touched their foreheads, gently burning hot. Fever, his heart raced. The boy's voice shook as he said, "They haven't eaten in 2 days." I tried to find food, but no one would give. Asterisk, Sundar froze. 2 days? Infants starving for 2 days? Every second now was a risk. Every moment a battle between life and death. He stood quickly. Determination replacing hesitation. We need to get them to a hospital, now. But the boy shook his head again, fear clouding his eyes. They won't treat us. Last time I went, they shouted at me, said beggars bring disease. They threw me out. Sundar's jaw clenched. He could feel the weight of the boy's distrust, carved from years of rejection and cruelty. But he also knew that doing nothing meant death. He held out his hand. Trust me, I will not let them turn you away. Come. The boy looked at his siblings, then at Sundar's hand. His small fingers trembled, torn between hope and fear. After a long pause that felt like eternity, he placed his hand into Sundar's, and at that exact moment, a police siren blared in the distance, growing louder as a jeep pulled up near the bus stop. 2 officers stepped out, their flashlights landing directly on the boy. You again? One of them barked. Didn't we tell you not to sit here using babies to beg? You're coming with us this time. The boy gasped, clutching Mira and Arjun tighter, his body shaking. His lips moved in silent prayer. Sundar stepped in front of him, his own body now a shield. The rain fell harder. The siren wailed behind them, and the officers drew closer with stern faces. And in that split second, Sundar realized this night was about to change everything. Asterisk, the rain grew heavier, almost as though the heavens themselves wanted to drown out the cries of the weak. The police jeep's headlights cut harshly through the night, blinding Sundar and the boy for a moment. 2 officers stepped closer, their boots splashing in the rising puddles, their expressions cold and impatient. One of them raised his flashlight and pointed it directly at the boy's face, making him flinch and hold the babies even tighter. How many times do we have to warn you, kid? The taller officer barked. This is illegal. Begging with babies, pretending they're sick, scamming innocent people. He reached forward as if to snatch the infants from the boy's arms. The boy cried out in panic, his voice breaking. No, they're mine. Please don't take them. They're not fake. They're my brother and sister. His words were soaked in desperation, but the officers only exchanged cynical glances. Sundar could see it, the disbelief, the contempt, the complete dismissal of the truth. It burned inside him. Before the officer could touch the babies, Sundar stepped forward, blocking his hand. His calm but commanding voice cut through the chaos. Stop, he is telling the truth. The officer frowned at him, clearly not expecting interference. And who are you to interfere? Some rich man with sympathy to spare? Sir, I advise you to step aside. We're doing our duty. The second officer nodded in agreement. These street kids play games. You get the money, they'll be back. Tomorrow with another story. We've seen it 100 times. Sundar's eyes darkened. He felt an anger he hadn't felt in years rise within him. He thought of his childhood, of how easy it had been for people to dismiss the struggles of the poor, to label their pain as fraud. He took a deep breath and spoke firmly, his tone heavy with authority. This boy has no one. Those babies are sick. If you waste another second here accusing him, you may be responsible for their deaths. For a moment, the officers hesitated. The taller one narrowed his eyes and said, You talk like you know him. Sundar didn't flinch. I do not know him. But I recognize truth when I see it. Look at those children. They're burning with fever. Does that look like an act to you? The beam of the flashlight shifted slightly toward the babies, and 4. The first time, doubt flickered across the officer's face. The babies' weak cries, their shallow breathing, their pale skin, no lie could fake that. Still, suspicion lingered in their eyes. Then one officer muttered, Rules are rules. He should be in a shelter. Not here. But these kids run away. The boy's voice cracked again, almost pleading. They locked me in before. They gave no. Food. People hit me. I escaped because Mira and Arjun were dying inside. Please don't take me back. The raw pain in his words made Sundar's throat tighten. He turned back to the officers, his voice firmer now. I will take responsibility. For him, if you want someone to answer, take my name. The taller officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. And who exactly are you to take such responsibility? This isn't the game. The driver, who had been silent until now, hurried forward, his voice trembling. Do you not recognize? Him. This is Sundar Pichai. The officers froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. The rain beat down harder, but suddenly the silence felt louder than the storm. Sundar stood tall, the water dripping down his face, his gaze steady. The taller officer's voice stuttered slightly. Sir, as in Google? Yes, Sundar said plainly. And right now, I am not here as a CEO. I am here as a human, being telling you to show compassion. These children need help, not punishment. The second officer lowered his flashlight, looking uncomfortable, but the taller one's pride fought against the realization. Sir, with respect to rules, without humanity are cruelty, Sundar interrupted, his voice sharp. Tonight, your rule is to save lives, not ruin them. For a long moment, the only sound was the hammering rain and the weak cough of the babies. Then, finally, the taller officer sighed heavily and stepped back. Fine, take them. But remember, you're responsible now. Sundar nodded, not breaking his gaze. I always am. The boy stared at Sundar as if he were witnessing a miracle. His lips trembled, but no words came out. His trust was fragile, but it was beginning to take root. Sundar reached down, placing his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Come. We're going to the hospital. The boy clutched the babies tighter and stood slowly, his legs weak, but his will strong. Together, they moved through the storm toward the waiting car inside. The warmth of the vehicle wrapped around them, but the air was heavy with urgency. The baby's cries had softened, but not in relief, rather in exhaustion, like a kind that comes before silence. Sundar's heart raced. He turned to the driver. Fast. Nearest hospital. The car sped through the flooded streets, wipers working furiously against the relentless rain. Sundar glanced at the boy, who was staring at the babies with wide, terrified eyes, whispering broken promises. Stay with me, Mira. Stay with me, Arjun. I won't let you go. The hospital finally came into view, its lights a faint beacon in the night. Relief washed over Sundar, but it was short-lived. As they rushed inside, the boy was immediately met with the same familiar scorn. A nurse wrinkled her nose, eyeing their drenched clothes and tired faces. You can't bring street children in like this, she said sharply. They spread infection. Take them to a government shelter. Sundar stepped forward, his voice steady but icy. Call the pediatric emergency team. Now, the nurse blinked, startled. Sir, rules say, do you know who I am? Sundar cut her off, his voice carrying the weight of decades of leadership and struggle. I am a man who will not stand by while children die at your doorstep. If you delay even a second, you will be the reason 2 babies don't see the morning. The nurse froze, her arrogance crumbling under his words. Before she could respond, a doctor appeared, alerted by the commotion. He glanced at the babies and his expression instantly shifted to urgency. Quick, get them inside. Prepare IVS. Oxygen. The boy nearly collapsed in relief, tears streaming freely now as he followed the doctors into the emergency room. Sundar stayed close, his presence unwavering, as machines began to beep and nurses rushed around. But then, as Sundar stood watching the doctor's work, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. It was an urgent call from his office, marked with red priority dot. He hesitated, torn between 2 worlds, the empire he had built and the fragile lives, fighting for survival before his eyes. And just as he turned his head back toward the hospital room, he saw one of the doctors shaking his head gravely. while another began to press against one of the baby's tiny chests. Sundar froze. His heart slamming against his ribs. Something was terribly wrong. Asterisk, the cold. White lights of the emergency room cast a harsh glow on the scene, unfolding before Sundar's eyes. Nurses moved swiftly, their hands practiced yet tense as they worked to stabilize the fragile infants. Meera lay on a tiny bed, her chest heaving in uneven breaths, while Arjun was in the arms of a doctor who pressed down rhythmically on his tiny chest, trying desperately to keep his heart from failing. The boy clung to the doorframe, his face pale, his body trembling as though the weight of the storm outside had entered his very bones. His lips quivered as he whispered over and over again, "Please, don't take them. Please don't take them. Please don't take them." Each repetition was more desperate than the last, as if he believed his words alone could hold death at bay. Sundar stood beside him, his jaw tight, his fists clenched, every part of him wanting to rush forward and take control. But here he was powerless. This wasn't a boardroom where his voice could move nations. This wasn't a stage where millions listened to his ideas. This was life at its rawest, where even the most powerful man in the room could do nothing but pray. His phone vibrated again in his pocket, more insistent this time. It was his team in California. Notification flashing: urgent crisis meeting, Europe deal, at risk. Under any other circumstance, Sundar would have answered without hesitation. Billions of dollars, thousands of jobs. The future of entire projects could hang on that call. Yet at this moment, none of that mattered compared to the shallow rise and fall of Meera's chest, compared to the fragile heartbeat they were fighting to preserve in Arjun. Asterisk. The doctor working on Arjun barked an order. Now, a nurse rushed with a syringe, and within seconds the medicine was injected. Sundar's heart pounded as the doctor pressed down again, his movements growing more urgent. "Come on, little one. Breathe. Stay with me." For a terrifying moment, silence swallowed the room. The machines emitted only flat, lifeless tones, and Sundar felt as though the world itself had stopped turning. He glanced at the boy, who had fallen to his knees on the cold floor, clutching his hands together, sobbing silently with his eyes lifted upward as if begging the heavens, and then a sound. A faint cry, weak but real. The monitor beeped, slow and shaky, but alive. Arjun coughed, his tiny body trembling, and the entire room seemed to exhale at once. The doctor sighed with relief, his face softening. "We've got him back. Keep monitoring. He's critical, but he's fighting." The boy let out a sob of gratitude so deep it sounded like it tore from the very center of his being. Sundar's own chest loosened, though the tension still gripped him hard. Meera's condition was still fragile, her fever spiking dangerously. Her breathing shallowed out. A nurse came over to the boy, her tone softer now. "They need to be admitted, both of them. We will do everything we can, but treatment will be long. Medicines, nutrition, regular care." She glanced hesitantly at him, her eyes filled with pity. "Do you have anyone who can pay?" The boy's face crumbled with shame. He shook his head, unable to form words, his tears falling freely now. Sundar stepped forward, his voice firm. "I will take care of everything. Every expense, every treatment, every medicine. Just save them." The nurse blinked, clearly surprised, then nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." As the staff hurried back to their work, Sundar turned to the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are not alone anymore." The boy looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, trying to comprehend what was happening. All his life, doors had been slammed in his face, people had turned away, and compassion had been denied to him. And now, suddenly, this stranger stood beside him like a wall of strength. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Why are you helping us? People never help." Sundar crouched to meet his eyes. "Because once I was like you. Maybe not in the same way, but I knew what it meant to feel small, to feel invisible, and someone helped me. Now it is my turn." For the first time, the boy's body relaxed, if only slightly. He nodded, his tears falling freely, his grip on hope beginning to return. Hours passed as doctors worked tirelessly. Sundar sat in the waiting area with the boy curled beside him, both of them too restless to sleep, too afraid to hope, too desperate to give up. The boy finally spoke, his voice soft. "My name is Anil." Sundar repeated it gently. "Anil? A strong name. You have carried more than most men ever will." Anil looked at him, his eyes searching. "Will they be okay?" Sundar hesitated, not wanting to offer false promises. "They are fighters, and now they have us. We won't let them fall." Before Anil could respond, a doctor stepped into the waiting area. His face was unreadable, his eyes tired. Sundar stood immediately, his pulse quickening. The doctor sighed. "Arjun is stable for now, but Mira, her fever is not breaking. If it continues through the night, there may be brain damage. We need stronger medicine, but it is not available here." Sundar felt his stomach sink. "Then where can we get it?" The doctor looked down as though reluctant. "A private hospital across the city. But it is costly, and transport in this storm is dangerous. Still, it may be her only chance." Anil's face turned white with fear. He clutched Sundar's sleeve desperately, his voice breaking. "Please, please save her. Don't let her die." Sundar's mind raced. His driver, his contacts, his resources, he could make it happen. But the storm was unforgiving. The streets flooded, and the clock was ticking. He looked at the doctor and said firmly, "Prepare her. We are going." But just as he turned, the hospital doors burst open. 3 men in muddy jackets barged in. Their faces hard, their eyes fixed on Anil. One of them pointed a finger and snarled, "There he is. The boy who ran from us with those babies. They belong to us." Anil's scream tore through the hall, raw and filled with terror. He clutched Sundar's hand, shaking violently. "Don't let them take us. They'll kill us. Please." Sundar froze, his blood running cold. The storm outside no longer seemed as dangerous as the storm that had just entered the hospital. Asterisk. The rain outside pounded against the hospital windows, like a drum of warning, but inside, the storm that had just entered the lobby was far more dangerous. The 3 men in muddy jackets advanced quickly, their voices rough and their eyes filled with greed. One of them, the tallest with a scar running down his cheek, pointed at Anil and growled, "That boy stole from us. Those babies are not his. He ran from our shelter. He belongs to us." Anil shrank back instantly, clutching Sundar's arm so tightly his nails dug into the fabric of his sleeve. His body shook violently as he cried out, "No, no. They're lying. Please, don't let them take me." His voice cracked under the weight of terror, the sound so raw that Sundar felt it slice into his chest. Sundar stepped in front of him, his tall frame shielding the boy and the fragile hope he carried. His voice, steady but sharp as steel, rang through the lobby. "Who are you? And what do you mean by saying these children belong to you?" The scar-faced man smirked coldly. "We run the shelter nearby. He ran away. The babies were given to us to raise, but he took them. Now we've come to collect what's ours." Sundar's eyes narrowed, his heart thudding. There was something in the man's tone that made the truth twist in dangerous directions. "Given to you? By whom?" Another man, shorter but with equally menacing eyes, coughed. "People abandon babies every day. They know we can put them to use, some as beggars, some as workers." "What's it to you, man?" The words hit Sundar like a slap. "Put them to use." In that instant, the truth became horrifyingly clear. These men weren't caretakers, they were traffickers. Vultures feeding on innocence, using children as tools for profit. Anil clung to Sundar tighter, his sobs breaking through his every word. "They beat me, they starved us, they forced me to beg. They wanted to take Mira and Arjun away from me. I couldn't let them. I ran. I ran because Mama made me promise. She said they are mine to protect." His chest heaved as the memories clawed their way out. The boy's voice filled with both fear and defiance. The scar-faced man sneered, "Enough lies. Give them to us, or this won't end well for you." The hospital staff froze in silence, too afraid to step forward. Whispers filled the corners of the lobby, people murmuring about the men, their reputation, the danger of standing against them. Sundar felt every eye on him, waiting to see if he too would step back like the rest. But something inside him refused. He thought of his own mother who had carried him through hardship with nothing but courage and faith. He thought of his father who had taught him to never bow to injustice. And he looked at Anil, just 12 years old, holding his siblings, with more love and loyalty than many adults could ever show. Sundar's voice was low but commanding, a tone that carried the weight of both compassion and power. You will not touch him, and you will never lay a hand on those babies again. The scar-faced man let out a dark laugh. Big words, rich man, but you have no idea who we are. Men like us. We run this part of the city. Please don't interfere. You think anyone here will side with you? Before Sundar could reply, Anil's grip tightened suddenly, and his voice rose in a terrified scream. Don't let them take us. Please. They'll kill us. That scream seemed to break something in the air. People began to shift uneasily. Some nurses whispering among themselves, one doctor inching closer as though ready to defend the children. Sundar's phone buzzed again, vibrating in his pocket like an echo of another world calling him back. Another urgent message from his office flashed on the screen. Decision required within the hour. His empire was pulling him, demanding his presence, but in this moment, his entire being was anchored here, standing between innocence and evil. He put the phone away and raised his chin. You said the police won't interfere. Let's test that. He turned sharply to the nurse at the counter. Call them now. The men tensed, their eyes narrowing. One of them hissed, Don't you dare. But Sundar didn't flinch. His calm was terrifying in its own way. Try to stop them. I will personally make sure the world knows what you're doing. Every camera, every news outlet, every corner of this city will know your names. You think you are untouchable? You've chosen the wrong night to test that. For a moment, silence crackled in the room, broken only by the rain hammering against the glass. The men exchanged uncertain glances, their arrogance faltering under Sundar's unwavering gaze. But the scar-faced man wasn't ready to back down. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. This isn't over. You think your money and name will protect you? We'll find them again, and when we do, not even you will stop us. Sundar didn't move. If you ever come near him again, you'll regret it. The men spat curses under their breath and finally retreated, their footsteps echoing down the hall as they disappeared into the stormy night. Anil collapsed into Sundar's arms, his body shaking uncontrollably. They'll come back. They always come back. They won't stop. Sundar held him tightly, his voice steady though his heart thundered. Then we will make sure they never come back. Not to you, not to anyone. Just then, the doctor rushed out of the emergency room, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. Sundar's heart sank instantly. Sir, the doctor said, his voice heavy. Mira's fever has spiked dangerously high. The medicine we need, it's running out of time. If she doesn't get it within the next 2 hours, she may not survive the night. Anna let out a wail so piercing it silenced the entire hall. He clutched at Sundar's sleeve, his tears streaming like rivers. Please, please don't let her die. You promised. You promised they wouldn't fall. Sundar felt the promise he had made earlier weigh like iron in his chest. 2 hours, a deadly storm, menacing traffickers lurking in the shadows, and a fragile infant's life hanging by a thread. He looked into Anil's desperate eyes, then at the closed doors where Mira fought for every breath. And for the first time in years, Sundar realized he was standing at the edge of a battle not fought with technology or strategy, but with the raw courage to defy fate itself. Asterisk, the clock ticked mercilessly inside Sundar's mind, every second slicing through the air like a blade. The doctor's words repeated over and over. 2 hours. 2 hours to save Mira's life. Outside, the storm showed no signs of slowing, its howls and crashes like a warning against anyone daring to cross its fury. But inside the hospital, a storm of another kind raged, fear, desperation, and the fragile hope of a child clinging to the edge of despair. Nil sat hunched in the waiting area, his small arms wrapped around Arjun, who lay weakly in his lap. The boy's face was wet, not just from tears, but from the weight of responsibility far beyond his years. He looked up at Sundar, his voice trembling like a broken string. You promised. You said they wouldn't fall? Please don't let her go. Sundar crouched beside him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. I did promise, and I intend to keep it. His voice was calm, but inside his chest, a storm of fear and urgency roared louder than the one outside. He stood quickly, pulling out his phone and dialing contacts with practiced speed. He called drivers, local officials, even hospitals across the city. Every answer came the same roads, flooded, ambulances stuck. Resources stretched thin. He turned sharply to the driver who had accompanied him. We will take my car. We need to get that medicine. The driver hesitated, his eyes wide. Sir, the water levels are rising. Cars are stuck everywhere. If we get trapped halfway, Sundar cut him off. Then we push forward anyway. Child's life is worth more than fear. The driver saw the fire in his eyes and nodded silently before leaving. Sundar turned back to Enel. He knelt low, looking into his wide, tear-filled eyes. Stay with Arjun. I will bring the medicine back. Trust me. Anil shook his head furiously, clutching Sundar's hand with surprising strength. No, don't leave me. If they come back, those men come back, they'll take us. They always find us. Sundar's heart twisted. He could not take Anil with him. It would be too dangerous. But he also couldn't leave him paralyzed in fear. He cupped the boy's face gently, his voice unwavering. They will not come near you again. I promise. And even if they try, this hospital is full of people now who saw the truth. They won't let you be taken. But right now, Mira needs me, and she needs you to be brave until I return. Anil's lips trembled, but after a long pause, he nodded. Slowly. Please, hurry. Sundar squeezed his hand firmly. I will. And with that, he rushed into the storm. The streets were rivers, water rising almost to the doors of passing vehicles. Horns blared, tires spun helplessly in the flood, and people waded waist-deep through the chaos. The driver gripped the wheel tightly, fighting to keep control as the car surged forward inch by inch. Sundar sat beside him, his jaw clenched, his mind locked only on the image of Mira's tiny body burning with fever. Every second mattered. A sudden crash jolted them as another vehicle, skidding in the water, nearly slammed into theirs. The driver swerved sharply, tires splashing waves onto the sidewalks. Sundar's body jerked, but he steadied himself. Keep going, he ordered Dot finally. After what felt like an eternity, the bright lights of the private hospital appeared. Ahead, Sundar leapt out before the car had even stopped moving, racing through the rain-soaked doors. Inside, he barely had to explain his reputation, his urgency, his sheer presence was enough. The staff rushed, packaging the rare medicine with care. Sundar seized it with trembling hands, his heart pounding. Dot on the drive back. The storm grew worse. Trees bent under the weight of the wind. Streetlights flickered ominously. And for a terrifying moment, their car stalled in a pool of rising water. Sundar's breath caught. We can't stop. Push it, he barked. Dot the driver floored the accelerator. The engine roared, and with a violent lurch, the car broke free from the flood. Sundar exhaled, clutching the medicine against his chest as though his own life depended on it. Dot when they finally pulled back into the hospital parking lot. Sundar didn't wait for the car to stop fully. He ran inside, his shoes splashing across the wet tiles. His breath heavy but determined. Dot the doctor met him at the door of the emergency ward, relief flashing across his exhausted face. You got it? Sundar thrust the medicine into his hands. Save her. Within minutes, the medicine coursed through Mira's fragile veins. Sundar and Anil stood outside the glass, watching, waiting, praying. Time dragged, every second stretching into eternity. Anil's fingers dug into Sundar's sleeve as if anchoring himself to hope. Dot. And then, slowly, the monitors began to steady. The fever started to drop. The shallow breaths grew stronger, and Mira's tiny fist twitched, curling slightly as though she was reaching for life itself. The doctor finally stepped out, his face breaking into the faintest smile. She's responding. The worst has passed. Both children are stable now. Anil's knees buckled, and he collapsed into Sundar's arms, sobbing not with fear this time, but with overwhelming relief. She's alive. She's alive? He repeated over and over, his voice trembling with joy. Sundar held him tightly, his own eyes misting. Yes, she is alive. Because you never gave up on them. The next morning, the storm had calmed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting warm rays across the hospital room where Mira and Arjun slept peacefully. Anil sat at their bedside, his face still streaked with exhaustion, but lit with a glow of hope he had never known. Sundar entered quietly, carrying a tray of food. He set it down in front of Anil. Eat? You need strength too. Anil looked up at him, his voice soft. I don't know how to thank you. Sundar smiled gently. You already have. You reminded me what it means to fight for someone you love. You showed me courage greater than anything I've ever seen. Anil blinked back tears. But what will happen now? When we leave this hospital, where will we go? They'll come again. Sundar's eyes softened. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're not going back to the streets. Not ever again. From today, you are under my care. You, Mira, and Arjun. I will make sure you go to school, that you eat every day, that you live like children should live, safe, loved, and free. Anil gasped, his mouth opening as the words refused to come. Tears spilled silently down his cheeks as he whispered, Is this real? Are you truly saying this? Sundar nodded firmly. Yes, this is real. And one day you will grow, and you will do the same for someone else. That is how the world changes, not through money, not through power, but through kindness passed forward. Anil buried his face into Sundar's chest, sobbing quietly, his small frame shaking as though finally releasing all the fear and pain he had carried for years. Sundar held him close, his own heart swelling with both sorrow and hope. And as he stood there, watching the sunlight fall gently over the sleeping twins, Sundar realized something. In the vast empire he had built, with billions of users and endless achievements, nothing compared to this moment holding a child who had found safety, giving hope where there had once been only despair. It was in this fragile hospital room, not in boardrooms or stages, that he had found the true measure of success.